The business meeting of the North Kingstown School Committee. If I could ask everyone to please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Madam Clerk, could you please call the roll? I know Mr. Jones stepped out for a minute, but I know he's returning. Here.
Mr. Jones, Mrs. Hoskins, here. Mr. Tony Jones, here. Mrs. Hildebrand, here. Mrs. Schott, here. And student representative.
Thank you. And could you please call the calendar?
There will be a school committee business meeting on Tuesday, November 13th, 2018.
Thank you. So the first item on our agenda today is a presentation regarding district-wide security initiatives, and we're going to run this a little bit like we did the bonded meeting that we did a couple weeks ago, where we're going to have a presentation, some remarks, and we'll give the opportunity of members of the audience to ask questions. We'd ask if you could please use this portion to ask specific questions regarding school security. If you'd like to comment on something else, we are going to have citizens' comments after this presentation portion, where you'd be given the usual 3 minutes to speak on any topic that you would like. So I'll turn it over to Dr. Auger to start with.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming out. And I know that tonight's meeting is being streamed as well for anyone watching at home, and will be available on tape. And if you don't mind, I'd like it if our guests tonight could introduce themselves. We're going to have I will lead with some points about what the school department is doing in terms of security. But I know that our town security leaders are here tonight and will participate in the discussion as well. Mr. Mollis, if you could start.
Sure. Ralph Mollis, Town Manager.
Scott Cattell, Fire Chief. Pat Flanagan, Chief of Police.
Foster Kell, current school resource officer at the high school.
Lieutenant Robinson, Patrol Lieutenant.
Okay, thank you. So, our mission for a school department is obviously the education of children, but our highest priority is the safety of our children and of the people who work for the school department. And, if there's a message that I would like to have go out for tonight, it is about to assure our community that there is ongoing planning and preparation when it comes to school security. But I also want to point out in our remarks tonight that if people have particular questions about school security, especially about specifics as they apply to the particular schools that you know about, please, no one's trying to be dismissive or anything, but we're probably not going to give very specific answers. But what we don't want to do is tip people off to, yeah, there are problems in a particular area or something that we're planning to address in the future, but not as being addressed right now. That's a tip that, well, there's a vulnerability. And so those kinds of points will not be made tonight. But I do want to go over kind of a summary of some of the initiatives that have been happening in the district. So going back about 5 years, the school committee hired an outside security consultation firm to kind of give us some coaching on what measures are out there, what are districts doing, and what kinds of things should we be doing, especially knowing that we don't have an unlimited source of money. No district does. And no one is really interested in turning every school building into, say, some kind of a fortress. So we need to be wise about how we spend money. We need to keep our eye on the ball, and we need to be mindful of security. And that means, the hardening of buildings, but it also means the education of our adults, our parents, our kids, and being mindful of what we watch for. This planning has led to measures in recent years to include the updating of all the district public address systems and door locks. Those seem like minor kinds of things. They don't seem like the type of thing that makes the front page news, but believe me, they are absolutely vital to having good communication within a building. And the coaching that we've gotten is that if your a classroom door is locked, you've just saved a whole lot of lives in the likelihood of a person with a gun in a building. And that proved itself for instance, at Sandy Hook. So increased quantity of cameras and surveillance throughout the district and our properties, increased use of technology for the purposes of timely communication with local emergency responders and with the public. It's also led to the installation of electronic exterior door keys for all district employees. Our plans are regularly being reviewed, updated, and acted upon as resources become available. On an annual basis, the school committee reviews and approves the school safety plans for all of our schools. These documents include details about all of the emergency protocols that the district are required to have in place and to practice on a regular basis. Our school committee has also submitted a school safety assessment for each school to the Rhode Island State Police. A representative from the Rhode Island State Police followed up with the committee, meeting in person with us in executive session to review any commendations and make any suggestions for us going forward. All of our schools perform by law 15 emergency drills with students and staff on an annual basis. These include fire drills, lockdowns, and evacuations. Officers from the North Kingstown Police Department and Fire attend and review our drills with us. All of our principals and key central office staff have met with the team of town emergency response authorities, including the gentleman we have here tonight, Town Manager Mollis, Chief Flanagan, Captain St. Ange, Lieutenant Robinson, School Resource Officer Paul Strackel, Chief Gattell, and our Fire Marshal Gordon Walsh. The purpose of these reviews is to be on the same page about emergency protocols and the communications and logistical details that we would all need to coordinate in the event of a lockdown or evacuation emergency. These are reviewed for each school. In the 2017-18 school year, this review included a school-by-school safety walkthrough conducted by Lieutenant Robinson and myself and each principal, and we continue to be in contact on issues that arise and to plan for other emergency drill practices, exercises going forward. As they are offered, the North Kingstown School Department administrators have attended trainings with Rhode Island Emergency Management Agency and with State Police, the latest of which was just this October 10th and was conducted by Captain Derek Borick of the Rhode Island State Police and was organized by the State Legislative Safety Committee and by Governor Raimondo. We had 5 administrative staff attend, and our SRO was with us. The topics had mostly to do with addressing increasing challenging social and emotional needs for our students. I've also been involved in a committee, Governor Raimondo's work group on gun safety. That group included about 30 different professionals to advise her on gun safety legislation. I was very proud to be a part of that. That committee included social emotional experts, law enforcement, education, mental health, medical fields, all recommending a wide range of roughly 20 or so different recommendations on a variety of items, including items that were pertinent specific to schools. On top of this, we feel very strongly that the social and emotional learning initiatives are what is really needed with our kids. Our kids are living with a lot of anxiety, and the more that they can deal with that anxiety and have healthy relationships with one another and know the signs of what to look for when someone is not being healthy or is kind of displaying that they may have some kind of desire to do harm to another person. Those are the kinds of things that we all need to be better at being watchful for and better at making sure we tell an adult or someone who can do something about it if we have some kind of suspicion that someone is not healthy for any reason. Some of those programs include, and I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about each one, but at our elementary schools, a program called Open Circle, which teaches kind of a common language about empathy, positive relationships, and problem solving. Choose Love is another program that's gaining a lot of traction around the district, particularly here at the high school. We're working with the Sandy Hook Promise Organization on initiatives that are, as kind of benign as Start with Hello, but also include, safety assessment and intervention protocols that they work with district leaders on, and the Say Something anonymous reporting tool that the whole district can coordinate with police so that parents and students, when they they know the signs about, you know, what to look for if something just looks a little out of place, and they know what to do with that information if they should feel that way. Our middle schools both are working with a Strong Kids curriculum. This is something that we are rolling out during, you know, the advisory sessions that we have at our schools. We have regular visits from the Attorney General's office about, you know, laws and social media and how to have healthy relationships there. We've had advice from the Lindsay Ann Burke Society and dating violence workshops. At the high school this year, many of our faculty are working to train with a program called Restorative Practices, which emphasizes, you know, not so much in terms of, you know, just punishing someone who has done an ill, but working with them to make it right and working with them on how to have healthy relationships going forward. So those are just a number of things and a number of angles from which the school department, you know, approaches school safety as a whole. There are a million different details and points that, you know, for security reasons I can't go over for every different building. But again, I want the public to be aware that there is an ongoing process. This is an ongoing set of goals that the school committee sets for itself and for me about the things that we feel we need to address next, and I'm sure there will always be every year those next items that we think we need to hit now that we've, you know, taken care of this year's items. So I'm going to bring this over to the far end. Mr. Mollis, you want to make a statement?
Thank you. I'll be very brief. Obviously, we're here to listen to the residents and parents and whatnot. I just want to elaborate on a couple of points. First, I want to thank the superintendent, the school committee, and the school department for they're being so proactive on this matter. I mean, we've been working with them for well over a year now, and they've been very proactive and concerned about making sure that we have a partnership and a cooperation that's second to none to ensure that we are planning for all different types of situations. I mean, you know, it's not only school safety, but as we're planning for this, it almost affects anything, whether it's a storm, whether it's a situation at the school, other than some of the things that we have been talking about. And this type of planning will help us in almost any endeavor. I also want to mention a couple of things. First, I would encourage anyone here this evening or listening, watching, that we in town have a mechanism called Code Red. You can go on our website at northkingstown.org and sign up for that. I want to stress that Code Red is not there just for a school safety situation, but the benefits are endless. We will notify you of road closures. We'll notify you of storm, of power outages, of evacuation situations, of something happening in the school, of a school being closed due to a boiler being down. It doesn't have to be a stressful incident. It just could be information. So I would encourage parents, residents to use that mechanism. And, of course, that falls in line with what we're talking about this evening, because this also gives us another tool to reach you and talk to you about something that may be happening at a school. So, again, I encourage you to do that. I also want to just mention that we're here this evening after months and months of planning, and not for reaction to any type of incident, any type of event. This evening has been months in the planning through the superintendent, and of course the individuals that you see here this evening representing our outstanding public safety departments here in North Kingstown. Our police and fire department are constantly vigilant when it comes to issues like this, and again, I just can't thank them enough. We are very, very lucky in this town, and they've been working hand in hand with the school department. And then finally, because I'm sure there's a lot of some questions or maybe some information you want to share with us, that we all, in addition to public safety, in addition to the school department, in addition to the administrators, the teachers, we also need the parents' assistance. And what I mean by that is that there's probably many ways that the parents could help, but there's at least two that come to mind. One is when you're with your child at school, make sure that you are not holding doors open, that you are letting that door close behind you. This school department has spent a lot of money in safety measures, and those measures are only as good as the people who are using them. So please be attentive to the fact of what you're leaving behind when you're walking out of a school, but also talk to your children. Whether it's, there's a lot, our children, our grandchildren are aware of what's going on, are talking to their friends. They most likely spend a lot more time on social media than we do. They surely spend a lot more time on social media than I do. So I would definitely encourage them to tell your children or grandchildren to let you know, let a teacher know, let administrator know, let our school resource officer know if there's something that they see or have heard that makes them uncomfortable, that concerns them, that just doesn't seem right. Let someone know, and at least we can pursue that. That type of mechanism will surely be extremely beneficial. And I can't think of anything else. I think the superintendent has covered everything. I know our public safety individuals are here this evening to answer questions, so I'll turn it back over to the superintendent. And again, whether it's this evening or another evening, we'll continue meeting, we'll continue exercising, we'll continue planning, and of course, we'll be here to answer any questions.
So there are not necessarily any specific directions further to go with this discussion. We were thinking there may be a number of questions from audience members, or some of the panelists tonight may want to also add some commentary to what we've just stated. But if anyone at any moment has some questions that they would like to raise, we'd be happy to take them at this time.
One thing I just wanted to mention is that, all of these initiatives that Dr. Ogier had mentioned, they're not just for, the worst case scenario that's in the back of everyone's minds. Each of these things has added benefits, whether it's, talking about locks, which is just increased security for the school in general, whether it's after hours for when students are in the building. Our increased communication systems come into play on things like snow days or an emergency early dismissal because the power went out at a school. And, I can't stress enough something that Mr. Mollis had mentioned and that our public safety officials mentioned to us as well in our earlier private session meetings is one of the most important and helpful things that any parent or staff member in the district can do is to, listen to the instructions that they're given in those types of emergency messages. So if it, asks you to pick up your child at a particular location, please, abide by what it's asking you to do. Whether it's a, non-emergency situation and we have a dismissal due to a power outage, if every single parent comes into the circle at the same time, it wreaks havoc with the school buses. So those types of things can just make everything go more smoothly, and, God forbid it's ever a more serious situation, it's going to be all the more important. But so at this time, I'd ask, if any members of the public had any specific questions regarding school safety that they'd like to ask of the panel here. We're here to answer them as best as we can, with the understanding, as we did mention, unfortunately, if they are extraordinarily specific things, we're probably not going to be answering them in a particularly specific way, because we don't want to tip anyone off as to, either procedures as to what we would do to react to a particular situation or a vulnerability. If you could just state your name and address, please. Yeah.
Mary Breimer, 200 Minor Road. I just wanted to ask our police chief and staff, from your experience, how many calls do you think that you've received in the past calendar year, or situations that you've been alerted to that would register on your radar screen as being something of concern? Because I feel like we're relatively safe, but then we don't hear about anything happening, which means you're probably doing a very good job at responding to things that don't make news. So I'm just curious how often you're brought into situations that could be potentially very dangerous and you were able to quietly handle that.
Okay, you're referring just to the schools?
Sure, just to
general?
schools with our teenagers' school safety. I'm thinking about gun violence, children that are in need that definitely need resources and attention.
Like I said, we have an SRO that's in the high school, so anything that transpires during the school day is handled by him. And a lot of time, why it's not reported is, A, they're juveniles, so we don't release that information. The other thing is, too, a lot of times the SRO will work hand in hand with the administration, and the person, some of the incidents don't raise the occasion of us having to arrest the subject, and usually it's something within the house, suspension, being expelled, that type of thing. So, and in the other schools, the elementary schools, we rarely have to go to anything there. But overall, for this school, the high school itself, and the middle schools, we don't have an SRO in the middle schools, but in the high school, I'll let Paul just, what would be average?
Several calls a week, but nothing that raises to the level that
Of those several calls per week, how often do you have to go to the parents of the student? Is it pretty much every
Generally,
call?
Even on minor incidents, parents get notified, so.
Of those, let's just say let's say 150 incidents that are brought to your attention per year, how many would keep you awake at night as a parent, as a police officer in this community? How many are very serious that you have to respond to and address?
I really haven't experienced any of those yet.
Okay, that's all I wanted to know. Thank you. You guys are doing a great job. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Randy Wheatman. It's very happy to see that there's so many people involved with this issue, and it sounds like there's a lot of progress in various areas. One of the challenges is talking about school security without exposing vulnerabilities, so I'll do my best to keep it real general. What I'm seeing as one of the areas where we need to work on quite a bit is physical security, access control, visitor management. If you have one person, a human being, making a decision about who gets into that door after hours, that's a single point of failure. And that single point of failure is, at best, fairly poor, because after you get into the door, there's no other way to control that person. They have open access to the building and all the students. So my question is, if you can tell me, are you working with digital or electronic mechanisms that take away that single point of failure and that reliance upon a human being for individual access to the building, such as RFID chips or ICC technology?
Well, I think, you're getting a little bit into, I'm going to jump in a little bit into the specificities of what our policies and procedures with respect to access control are that, I'm not really comfortable in getting into a lot of detail on. I'll take the question as best as I can to say that, as Dr. Ogier had mentioned, we have instituted policies throughout the district and also physical improvements to security that are very much in the area that you're referring to. Yeah, Mr. Jones. Mr. Robert Jones.
Yeah, I think, Randy, related to your point, I want to echo something that Manager Mollis said. I know a lot of this was talking about during schools, and I'm kind of reminded, we've got one of the fitness places that relies on 24/7, and it's kind of hold the door is nice, but not at this business. Not only during schools, but our schools are used by town recreation, by community groups, by a lot, and so I think it's a whole mindset, related to what you're saying is we kind of get comfortable, I want to access, our rec basketball, or this group wants to use the schools. We're going to have to sort of get as a community into a mindset about security in terms of not, if you're granted access, for your group, you have to be vigilant about making sure that only the people, in your group get it, and that we don't leave doors open, or we don't because it's convenient to prop it open because I'm only going to be running to my car for 5 minutes. We just have to get into a mindset of thinking like that, not only during the school day, but everyone who uses the school facilities.
That's a good point. Just to add on to that, I know there may be some pushback that this isn't a federal installation. Some of us are familiar with how the federal government does it. But it is what it is. And I think we do need to get in the security business. I don't want to be seen as the soft target. We need to be at least perceived as the tough target, the hard target. And maybe that means that our students have IDs with RFID chips in them. I don't know. But we've got to get better at this.
Thank you. Next, and if you could please state your name and address.
Yeah, Craig Lockwood, 530 Westmoreland Lane. I'm curious if the panel can comment on your perspective on the efficacy of drills. So, I know there's been some security experts who have claimed that they can actually be counterproductive because they have a desensitizing effect. I know a number of the teachers in Parkland claimed that they thought it was a drill that was going on in a planned drill, and it caused a delay in them taking action.
When they announce a drill, if they have a lockdown drill, they announce it. This is a drill. This is a drill. So I'm only going to assume if it was a real-life emergency, that announcement is not being made. And I think just everything else going on in the school, they're going to tell the difference that it's not a drill. But I think we need to have the drills because it needs to be second nature, that they don't have to think about it and they just react the way they've been trained, just like police officers and firefighters. The more you do it, the easier it is.
I'd also like to add that, you know, from the school leadership perspective, with our principals and with our teachers, you know, they're watching the news as well, and we're all getting it that there's no such thing as a drill that you just take lightly, and we're trying to ingrain that as much as we possibly can into our kids, that everything needs to be treated like the real thing. And if we find that someone is not treating it like the real thing, we do address that situation. Absolutely.
Stacy Elliott, 94 Rosemary Drive. First, I want to thank you guys all for doing this. I know as a parent who has a child that goes to school, this is, it means a lot to me. It's something that I've, thought that the community needed to hear from you guys on a public forum. So thank you for doing this, first of all. I do have a couple of questions. Mr. Arge, you had mentioned that there are a number of programs and both trainings and programs that are rolled out in the schools. And I was just wondering, especially for those trainings, like what, for like teachers and staff and things like that, what participation is like. Is it mandatory? Is it voluntary? And are we getting good turnout in those trainings?
Dr. Humbert is our resident expert on social and emotional learning.
Yeah, the trainings for these programs, particularly the Open Circle program, started about close to 7 years ago, and we rolled it out gradually with the elementary schools, and certain staff were initially trained, and at this point all of our teachers have been trained. It was mandatory, but we rolled it out in phases. It's a very expensive training, but they've all been trained. The TAs and the specialists have all been trained as well. That's at the elementary level. At the middle level, we have programming going on, basically being done in the advisory sessions. But at the high school, the restorative practices, there's a core group of teachers that are going to be trained. In fact, on our Professional Development Day, November 6th, there are close to 20 teachers, staff members being trained. So they will be the core team, and following that, there will be, and that was by invitation. So, but it was mandatory to roll, basically to roll out the programming. But they asked for volunteers first, and then they will roll it out to the rest of the staff as time goes on.
Okay, great.
And all the administrators at the high school were trained in that program.
Good to know. Thank you.
If I can add one thing. I'd also like to point out that even though there are a number of these types of initiatives, some of which started several years ago, some of which we're moving on in the last year or two, we have a tremendous set of, social workers and school psychologists that lead training for our employees, and we've taken advantage of professional development opportunities with them, with the state, with grant money that we've gotten for a whole host of items, including like suicide prevention and different issues that our kids are dealing with. We've hosted community events where there have been panel experts that have come and spoken to the community, spoken to parents. So those things still exist, but we just kind of highlighted some of the school-wide and district-wide programming that's been happening in the last few years. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's great. I just
right.
Was following up with that, which is actually leads into my next question, which is, is there like a school psychologist or school counselor available at each school currently?
There are social workers and school psychologists, not necessarily one in each school. In some cases, they're shared by a couple of, say, elementary schools. The school committee has just added a social worker to our ranks, so we have a school psychologist and a social worker on board just for the high school, and one for the middle schools and a few of each for the elementaries. We feel that we could certainly use more, but we also feel that we've got things under control with that group. This group also added some behavioral management assistance in the last budget cycle, and that's in a budget cycle where we were cutting more than we were adding. So there's a recognition, not only by the North Kingstown School Department, but I just think nationwide, that social emotional piece is so important, and schools are doing what they need to do to increase that staff, increase that programming. It's a big push all around for that, including here.
Yes, thank you. So that kind of covers the preventive stuff, and I just have a question, just one more question for the additional folks that are here tonight. I'm wondering, I know that Narragansett had the training on the beach with, if like public, if something happened, a public shooting training that happened on Narragansett Beach, which I thought was great. But I was wondering if there's additional training that is available to you guys, or that you guys are doing, in the event that, so we're organized, and that if something does happen, that, in the event that something does happen, that you guys are able to properly, like, respond and, deal with the situation. And I guess if there's not, if what else you need to make that happen.
Okay. That exercise, we participated in that exercise. We were part of that exercise down there, so, including the fire department. So that was a multiple town exercise for that particular reason, that if something was to happen, everybody knew where they were going to go, where they staged up and everything. So we did that training. That was one of the first ones they've had since I've been on, that in-depth. I can only speak for the police side. We do in-service training year-round, and then there's schools that come up, active shooter schools, different things. So they're constantly there's some mandatory training that everybody has to have, and then there's other ones where we send certain officers that will come back and train. It's called train the trainer. But basically year-round, we were constantly sending people to different schools for different things that just makes the department better, work better.
That's great. Do you feel like there's more that you'd like to attend, you just aren't able to for whatever reason? Like, is there more that?
Well, I've been on it over 30 years, and a lot of times, sometimes some of the school or one-day things are like fillers. You don't really get much out of them. You might get something a little bit. So I sort of concentrate on more on sending people to schools where they can bring, the officers that go can bring something back to everybody. We don't really have a problem with sending people. I don't have the problem spending the money to send them, and because training, you have to train. So we constantly train and do what we have to do.
Awesome. And then just one last comment. My last comment is that my 6-year-old, she's a first grader, and I find it hard sometimes to talk to her about school safety, and she doesn't obviously understand, like, what that's like or what to do. Like, they have the drills, but she doesn't really get it. And I don't want to freak her out and make her, paranoid. So I think my last, request, not so much a question, is that I guess we communicate with parents or train parents better in how do I talk to my 6-year-old about this? How do I make her understand that this is a serious thing, and, that this could happen without, psychologically damaging her, I suppose. I guess maybe some more outreach in that from, like, maybe a, psychiatrist point of view, or, counselors, or if there's some sort of, like, communication that I'm, could hand out or something. I don't know, something
okay.
for
That's
help
duly
me.
Noted, yeah. Well, I'll talk to our school psychologists and see if there's something that we can send out in that regard.
All right.
About how to talk to your children about school safety.
Exactly, yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else?
Jack Pine, 315 Butternut Drive. Just going back on the drill question, do we have, how often do we drill? And do we drill for a fire drill, and then you have a drill also for a stranger in the school? And is this done at all levels, like from elementary through, 'cause
Yes.
I'm assuming a fire drill, you want everybody out of the building as quickly as possible. Another drill, you kind of want to somehow contain them into classrooms and...
State law requires us to have a total of 15 drills a year. So it happens on a pretty regular basis, and those include fire drills, they include evacuations, and they include lockdowns. Even shelter-in-place type of thing. We're not much of tornado zone, but just yesterday morning, we had to talk to schools about there was a tornado warning in Rhode Island, and you need to be mindful that, get away from windows and things like that. So, there are lots of different ways emergencies manifest themselves, and that number is a good number, I think. It's not so disruptive that you're doing it every day, but it is something you have to be mindful of every so often, to make it happen. And the fire drills in particular aren't necessarily always the same. They require us to block off different places and like pretend the fire's in this part of the building. So it's not always the same routine all the time. You have to kind of be mindful of checking the environment and responding to it. So.
Just even like with the elementary, I would be
Yeah, and
kind
that's
of
at
wondering with
every
younger
school.
kids, a fire drill they might understand.
Yes.
To try to have them drill with the intention that someone's coming into school to do harm to someone.
Yeah.
That's going to be a whole total
Yeah,
thing with younger kids.
it's an age-specific kind of discussion that you have to have with kids, and even high school kids can get pretty emotional and distraught over having to go through that drill, particularly after they've seen something on the news where, like a Parkland shooting or something like that. I've heard from a number of students with those anxieties, and they understand why they have to do it, but it can be, even just the drill can be traumatizing for some kids.
And I do notice all the classrooms now have the black shield on the class.
Yes.
That's excellent. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Anyone else with any questions? Okay. One thing I want to do, and I apologize, I jumped on my agenda. If I could ask everyone to take a moment and please rise for a moment of silence for Miles Dodd, who is a 2018 graduate of North Kingstown High School, who passed away recently. Thank you.
So if there are no further questions, I'd like to, thank our town leadership for being a part of this discussion tonight. I hope you found it valuable. We are all available to you if you have any particular follow-up questions for us, and that goes for anyone who happens to be watching this in a recording or streaming. I know people have approached me a number of times over the years, particularly after they see some kind of a school shooting in the news, what kinds of things are we doing? And this is in response to that. I think people need to know that our school department and our security officials are working hand in hand on this, and I really appreciate the relationship that the school department has with them. Couldn't be more pleased about the responses that we have. Someone asked about, how often do we talk to the police and fire, and it's pretty regular. And it's not just for things where we're worried about, say, those really violent situations, but on a number of occasions we're talking to them about situations where we have to call because of suspected abuse, or a DCYF call, or just something where we have a concern about a student, about something that happened over the weekend, and we're talking to them regarding that. So there's that relationship being so good is to all of our benefit, that our principals and our teachers and central office staff feel very comfortable picking up that phone and talking to the town manager or the chief of police or the fire department. It really does help, and they've been very responsive in all cases, and it's much appreciated, so thank you.
And again, I'd like to thank, on behalf of all the school committee members, thank you for coming out on an evening tonight to be a part of our panel. Thanks.
Thank you.
So carrying on our agenda this evening, as I mentioned, we do have our routine citizens' comments. So if anyone would like to come to the microphone on any issue regarding the school department, you may do so. We'd ask if you please limit your comments to 3 minutes. Anyone sign up? Okay. Anyone who didn't sign up, like the opportunity. All right. Thank you very much. So moving on to our agenda for routine items. First, if I could have a motion to seal the executive session minutes of October 30th, 2018. I have a motion from Ms. Hoskins. Second from Ms. Hildebrand. All those in favor? Aye. Aye. Mr. Jones says aye. That passes unanimously. And I can disclose that no votes were taken in our executive session this evening. For the consent agenda, I have a number of items that I need to exempt for various reasons, so I'm going to do that first. So I'm going to exempt from Section E items E4, E5, E10, E11, and E12. Do any other members have anything they would like to exempt from the consent agenda? Hearing none, I'd ask for a motion to approve the non-exempted consent agenda items. I have a motion, Ms. Hoskins.
Second.
Second, Mr. Robert Jones. Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? That passes unanimously. So the exempted ones, I'm going to take one at a time for the various reasons. So I'm going to make a motion to approve item E4 with the change that Lindsay Rose will begin at step 2 because of the change to the contract that we made recently. So I'm going to make that motion. It's just, a couple of these are just little nits on the agenda. So if I could have a second to that motion? I have a second from Ms. Hoskins. Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Passes unanimously. For item 5, need to make a change pursuant to the contract. The proper coach stipend for Brendan Simeone should be $3,045. So I'm going to make a motion to approve item E5 with that change. A second from Ms. Hoskins. Discussion? Mr. Jones.
It's not related to that point, just on the coaches.
Can you turn your mic on? Sorry.
Yeah. Dr. Zay, I was just going to say, I know the winter season starts November 13th or 12th, and I don't think we meet till 13th. I think there's just a few coaches we still need to approve, like Whitford Middle, just a couple. So just
I think it's a couple of assistants.
yeah. So just that we're on track, to realize, because if we don't meet the 13th,
Mary, can you get your mic? Sorry.
We have a big gap.
So,
That-
is that on?
Hit the button.
There we go. There are a couple of assistants, but that's not going to preclude us from being able to start. But you're right, I believe swimming was one of them that we are missing an assistant, and there's at least one other one. But that's not because, it's because we don't have anybody. So
No, I know. No, I realize that. I just
Yeah,
say
right.
just the recognition that
Yep.
the 13th we need to
absolutely, if we can, if we have somebody.
Right.
Okay, so the next is, oh, sorry, we've got to vote. You're right. So you had a motion and a second. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Passes unanimously. So the next is item E10. Just scrolling through my agenda here for a second. I want to check something. Yep.
You're really, what you're doing on that one is really in E11.
Right.
There is a resignation of Ms. Amy Denhoff that is a retirement, so it's just a flip-flop.
Okay, so then we don't really, we'll take it one at a time. So a motion to approve the retirement of, I have Amy Abramson Denhoff, correct? Yeah, okay. Motion to approve the retirement of Amy Abramson Denhoff. I could have a second. I have a second from Ms. Hildebrand. Any discussion? All those in favor? Oops, sorry. Yeah?
There's two. There's a second resignation.
Oh, okay, so I'm sorry. So we're on the retirement, sorry. So we're adding, let me rephrase it. Withdraw that, start over. For E10, we're going to add Amy Abramson Denhoff to the retirements. So I'm making a motion for that. And a second from Ms. Hildebrand. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Passes unanimously. And for E11, I'm going to make a motion to remove Amy Abramson Denhoff from E11. And I have a second, so we'll approve E11 without Amy Abramson Denhoff. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Passes unanimously. That's the end of the consent agenda. Look, did I mess something up? I'm sorry. Okay, going too fast. E12, we're just going to withdraw it from the agenda with unanimous consent unless anyone has an objection. We'll take no action on that item tonight. Okay, Now, at the end of the consent agenda, item F, as you know, each of us was given the opportunity to review the various school crisis plans, in accordance with the discussion that we had this evening. Under the Open Meetings Act, those items are exempt from public disclosure for obvious school security reasons. So we do have to approve them in public session, unless anyone has any comments should have been made during the executive session. So I just ask for a motion to approve item F1. I have a motion, Ms. Hoskins, second, Mr. Robert Jones. Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Passes unanimously. Next, item G, school committee appointment of members to the contract negotiating committee. The NEANK contract is coming up this year, and we're getting ready to begin the process of negotiating that contract with the teachers union. I'd mentioned at a couple meetings that we need to have, we usually have 2 school committee members serve on a committee to negotiate that contract. There wasn't a whole lot of interest from people. I certainly am volunteering, well, okay, so now we'll have a discussion. So, Mr. Jones, are you?
Unless anyone else wants.
You're, okay, so we have 2 people volunteering, and Mr. Jones is withdrawing his volunteer. No offense, please. So, all right, so it looks like it'll be myself and Ms. Hildebrand on the negotiating committee, assuming we approve it. So I'll make a motion to approve the appointment of myself and Ms. Hildebrand to the NEA, do we have to be specific, or the contract negotiating committee? Yep. So I have a motion. Any second? Second from Ms. Hoskins. Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay. For unfinished business, the only things we have here are 2018-19 school budget. Anything worth note? And CIP existing bond, future bond? Nope. I will just make the point with respect to future bond and in general, please get out and vote. The election is next Tuesday. And we, all the school committee members, I think well, at least I will, and I think I speak for most of us in asking for your support, in particular on question number 4, and my own personal plug to please support question number 6, which would amend our town charter so that we wouldn't have long unelected appointments to the school committee. So that's something that I've worked on quite a bit. You certainly may. Could you pass it down? Yep.
Will that go into effect immediately?
It would not affect this election. It would affect the next. Well, it would affect anyone who's elected now, yes.
Okay.
So if in January one of the newly elected members were to resign, it would be pursuant to that section of the charter.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so I guess yes, it would. So that's CIP bond, future bond, no other new business, and we had a disposal notification. Any questions about that in your agenda? Then we've reached the end of the agenda. If I could ask for a motion to adjourn. I have a motion, Ms. Hoskins, second, Mr. Robert Jones. All those in favor? Aye. We are adjourned. Thank you for coming out this evening.